There we are. I always love when I see that live red button. I say it all the time at the beginning of every show because it makes it real. It's happening real time in the real world. So it's been a minute since On the Cusp has had a show. You know, life's been busy on many fronts. Some of you are privy to that and know what that's been like for this guy right here. But always to frame the show and the intention of the show. So On the Cusp is really about not giving up on your dreams, your aspirations, and just really you know, putting yourself first and trying these shows with our guests to provide some tools and some fuel. And that's by just sharing, you know, openly and candidly about things and the obstacles and the challenges that we face in our personal, professional, and spiritual and et cetera lives, because we all have them. And sometimes just kind of airing them and sharing them gives us a different perspective or a different way to look at things. Or it's like, hey, that was a really smart thing or a smart approach. You know, we're going to be talking about maybe habits too, the good habits that we create for ourselves. And two people just sitting on the park bench shooting the breeze. So this is ultra special for me because at the beginning of every show, I introduce the guest of OTC and how I know them. Well, if you pay close attention to the last names, I think it's self-evident that this is my wonderful, beautiful, smart daughter that agreed, and I appreciate her wanting to come on the show and do this show with me. So this is extremely special for me. So thank you, Mackenzie St Laurent. And you know, kind of before I turn it over, I think the show is, at least for me, is going to provide a lot of value in the discussions that we're going to have, and we'll get to that in a second. But I'll turn it over to you now, Mackenzie, and just to share a little bit about yourself, your background, and why we're here today, and what we're looking to achieve in our discussion.
Sounds great. Thanks, Dad. It's so good to be here and very special for me too. I jumped at the opportunity when you had the idea to be on the show. I'm Mackenzie. I am a holistic health coach and cyclical living coach. My background is actually in psychology and some counseling, which we'll get into a little more in the show after. But my passion is really holistic health and empowering people to feel the best that they can and to live their unique life. And what brought me into that was actually my background in psychology and counseling, of seeing how many tools are life-changing that people don't have access to or know about unless they go to counseling and start that journey. But that there's so much more to feeling your best than just counseling. So that's a bit about me. And I hope to open people's hearts, minds to different ways of being with themselves, emotional regulation, nervous system, that kind of thing. And just a great conversation with a very special person in my life. So I'm excited to get into it.
Awesome. So as you know, I was telling Mackenzie, I said, if I'm looking down, it's because I'm writing fervently some very important points that we kind of want to keep wireframing and grow from. Now, the counseling, so your background in psychology, went into counseling. And what specifically about counseling that you were kind of passionate about to pursue and anchor yourself to, and now that where you're going and this being your business? So what about it is that important to you?
I think counseling became important to me through my own personal experience. I always felt really different. I felt really emotional. I got told that I was sensitive a lot. And I just wanted to understand myself and to understand how to live with being that sensitive. I'm not going to magically not be a sensitive person, but that there are tools that help me to feel more in control of it and to not allow. I used to use the analogy, I felt like the ocean was just like crashing me against rocks all the time. Like I just was rocked by life, and I wanted to feel a lot more grounded in who I am. So I found counseling throughout school, and I turned to it whenever I needed support, whenever I felt lonely. And what really became a passion of mine was when I started learning about the nervous system and how transformative the counselor-client relationship actually is. So the more I learned about counseling as, I guess, a supportive practice, but also the thing that really lit me up was in my first counseling class, they said, from a lot of people, the counseling relationship is the first secure relationship they'll actually have in their life. And that blew my mind. And learning how healing, just being with someone else who is secure, whether that's in their attachment style, which we can get into, or their nervous system, or just what it means to be in relation to someone who can receive you emotionally, and how healing that can be for the rest of your life, and how transformative just one person and one experience can be for the rest. So it was less about the actual talk therapy, and it was more about sitting with someone else's emotions and teaching them how to be with their own.
I especially like what you said near the beginning of how, kind of counseling got introduced to you into your life, and, using the analogy of an ocean and being kind of smashed and crashed. And I'm sitting there and it's just kind of resonating with me, and being 51 years of age, and you and I have had pretty in-depth conversations about, life and relationships and emotions and feelings. And I'm really looking forward to learn a lot more about some of the comments you made. And for me, that was important too, because I've been through therapy. I've been through counseling over the years on a few different occasions. You say something about, you said that real, true, first secure relationship. And my goodness, that on it, like, that's so true. That's so true. And I remember the first time I met with a therapist or counselor for the first time. Of course, there was this huge level of anxiety and stress and worry, because you don't know how to unpack it, or where to start, or how that person is going to make you feel, right? Because it's a perfect stranger. And I learned pretty quickly that when somebody is listening to you 100% impartially, and listening with the intent to understand versus, kind of looking to feed you some answers right away, it felt really good. For me, it felt very, very liberating, and to trust that relationship. And then when you have a relationship of trust, you're able to work and move through things. So that I really connected to that comment. And well, you're a coach, right? Counseling is coaching, and that I'm a big fan of coaching. And I think what makes you such a successful coach, and not only in the way you speak and the way you understand and feel things, is you're also coachable. And I think you started with that in your life. You got introduced to that. You saw the value in you. Now you picked it up and you're doing something, and you're kind of paying it forward, right? And with all that experience, that's going to make you a very effective counselor. So I like to think that I'm coachable too. So that's why I love these shows, and guests will like yourself will teach me something. So you made mention, I don't know where you want to go exactly from here, because there's different themes. You talked about emotional regulation. So like, I'm curious. I have a few points that you said. So if you want to dive into that, I'd love to hear more about emotional regulation.
Yeah, emotional regulation was the thing, and nervous system regulation, I'll use them interchangeably, was the thing that really changed my life. I have a history of depression, anxiety, that actually ended up being linked to my cycle through PMDD, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is, I lovingly call it PMS on steroids. And the more I learned about my nervous system and how we interact with the world based on our earliest childhood experiences up until now, that's what really gave me my power back, to feel like I could move through the world and not be rocked by every single thing that was going on. And it also gave me the language to understand what was happening. So it turned from being really anxious to, oh, I'm dysregulated right now, and that means that I'm up here, versus depression can be seen as kind of down here, and then there's your baseline. So knowing where I was at within my nervous system window, it's called a window of tolerance. This is like it's fight or flight. So fight would be up here, fight or flight would be up here, and then fawn would be down here, and then our window of tolerance is where we want to stay. And our window of tolerance can be really, really tiny. So I was here. I was hair trigger. I'd shoot through the roof. People couldn't talk to me about things. Things really affected me, and I wouldn't be able to stay in a window where I was calm, present, and regulated. So when I found that language and I started to understand, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. I just have life experiences that have affected my ability to stay within that window of tolerance. And then the magic part of that is we can actually widen it. So we're not stuck here. Just because we might live in this doesn't mean that we have to live in this forever. So the more I worked with my nervous system through breathing, meditation, mindfulness, all these practices that we hear all through our life. It's really annoying when you're anxious and someone says, "Have you tried breathing?" You're like, fuck off. But
love you, kiddo.
It works. It does work. So the more I felt empowered to be like, okay, in this moment, I might be feeling anxious or triggered or whatever you want to say. I'm feeling heightened. I now know enough about myself and my nervous system to know that I need some space from this. I need to breathe. I need to release my emotions. That's where the emotional regulation comes in. So most in our society, we don't really embrace our emotions, especially anger. So learning the ways in which I could safely feel those emotions really changed my life. And all of these came out relationally. That was my biggest motivation, was how can I be in relation with other people? I love other people, but I don't feel safe around them. But that's my job, is to feel safe. So that's a bit about emotional regulation for me.
Wow, that's super cool. That's very well articulated. I like really understand the concept. And you were ahead of me, which is not a surprise when you talked about that window of tolerance. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, no, I've never looked at it that way." And I think we all, as human beings, have that window of tolerance. And you were talking about like someone said it could be like, sandwich thin. And then how do we grow that window of tolerance? And maybe looking at, we talked about meditation, you talked about mindfulness, right? And all that stuff that I connect to, kind of like emotional intelligence. It's just really being introspective, and that's what you've spent many years doing, right? If you're looking at somebody, when you said hair trigger, I mean, I've had my episodes in my life where it's like it's just like beep, and it's like through the roof.
Yeah.
And I had to, listening to you explain that, is wow, man, did I ever spend a lot of time going to work on that, and being able to widen that window of tolerance. And for me, it's not to be a better person for the people around me, it's to be a better person for me, and ultimately feel good. And like you use the word safe, right? Safe in your skin, and within yourself, with your emotions and your feelings. So that's really good. Any other kind of tips or advice that you would be able to share with me and the audience on how you're able to manage that window of tolerance, other than the ones that you've mentioned?
Yeah, I would say the first step is always awareness. So just being aware of your bodily sensations. I wasn't able to widen my window of tolerance until I felt safe in my body. And that, I would say, is the first step, is like the awareness. Do you know how sadness feels in your body? Do you know how anger feels in your body? If you can just spend time with yourself in those emotions, that is widening the window of tolerance. So it's the amount of time you can spend with that emotion before you're out of your window of tolerance and dysregulated. And also starting to notice, what are the signs that you are out of that window of tolerance? Especially, you can do this by looking historically at times where maybe you've been really down, depressed, anxious, angry, maybe in a fight with your partner where you're like, why did I say that? Starting to notice, and that requires presence, which is also a key to the window of tolerance. And don't beat yourself up. Like, you are going to exit your window of tolerance. The goal is not to live there. The goal is to spend most of your time there and also know how to get back there. So a lot of self-compassion, awareness. A tool I love to use is journaling. But if you wanted to take out a piece of paper tonight and just write down, how does it feel when I am angry, sad, kind of map out your emotions and how those bodily sensations are. And then also what it's like when you're outside of that window of tolerance. So for me, I know some signs that I'm leaving my window of tolerance is this urgency, this sense of like, I need to talk to this person right now and it can't wait. And I'll typically say something I don't necessarily mean or in the way that I want to. So having, which I've cultivated over many years, but even if you just catch yourself and you don't stay in your window of tolerance, that's still building the ability to widen it. So it's a lot, I keep saying awareness, but also a lot of self-compassion. Like, give yourself compassion and forgiveness for all the times that you didn't and that you won't. There's nothing wrong with you. We're meant to experience the whole range of our nervous system. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it's awesome. I'm just consuming it, like just eating up like Skittles, to be honest with you. Because as you know, I'm a huge fan and very passionate about the human condition, right? It's kind of like I've always been fascinated with observing people and why they do or they don't, why they self-sabotage or why they trip over themselves. Or it's like, why didn't you just make that straight line crooked? Why? You went out of your way to just fuck that up. But anyway, yep. we all do it. We're all guilty of that for our own different emotional reasons. But I want to hitch my wagon to a couple of things. When you said body sensations, you correct me if I'm wrong, I immediately think physiology, right? It's how your physiology changes with a feeling or an emotion. And it's true. If you say, like the words that we use, the self-talk, maybe that kind of all, goes in there. If you're reacting to things and you're always saying, wow, that really pisses me off. Well, your physiology is going to adopt a disposition of being pissed off versus, like it kind of irked me, or, it's somewhat bothersome, or I didn't appreciate what you said. Right. So that is one thing that I picked up. Anthony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within, he talks at length about that, and the words that you choose can help you manage, where you are in that window. So physiological responses. Now, the other one, the word anger. Oh, man. I'd like to hear more about that on your end of things. And I've had plenty to be angry about in my 51 years on this wonderful planet. And in a lot of times, the external world, which you have no control over, will dish some stuff out to you. Yep. And, looking at, my formative years as growing up, childhood and whatnot, there's a lot of stuff that, kind of built up as far as being angry and trying. And with anger, Mackenzie, maybe you can help me with your dad with this, is figuring out why you're angry. What am I angry at, right? Because for me, anger was the hardest feeling. I even to this day, it's like, I stay away from being angry because I don't necessarily want to see that person. I don't want to see my angry self. I work real hard to try and stay, I'm going to use that all the time, right, within that window. But it's an important emotion to acknowledge. But my struggle has always been, why the fuck am I so angry with this or with that? So I don't know. Maybe you can shed some light. You can give me a flashlight moment here to help your dad out on the anger side of things.
I would love to. So I know about your childhood and your background, and knowing what your childhood was like, it makes sense that anger would be an emotion that you push away or that you try to avoid. But oftentimes, we need to heal that relationship to that emotion. So just because your experience of anger was volatile, unpredictable, all these things that I'm sure you now want to reject, and you're like, that is not me, I will never be that. Healing the relationship that is not the only way to express anger, and trying to find examples of healthy anger. And I know that you have a very long history with working out and being active, and that is such a great outlet for healthy anger. That feeling of digging deep when you lift and doing those things that make you feel empowered by your anger. And then the other thing is understanding that anger is what we call a secondary emotion. So it's a protector. It's our great protector. It tells us when a boundary has been crossed, when something's not working for us. It's important. And having anger is vital. Like, imagine never getting angry. You'd be a doormat. You wouldn't know where your boundaries are. So understanding what your like you said, the physiological signs are, is a great way to feel empowered by anger, rather than it, like the example of your childhood, that's unhealthy anger. That's unmanaged anger. That's destructive anger. But anger doesn't have to be those things. It can be a motivator, a protector, all of those things. But the physiological sensations might be, oh, I'm noticing my heart's getting faster, or I feel really like hot. So things like that. And once you can catch those things, getting curious about what that anger might be telling you. Your body is always trying to protect you. It always has your back. And so trying to understand, okay, I'm starting to feel angry. Is it that someone's text didn't sit right with me and actually kind of pissed me off? And what does that mean? What about that? So coming back to the secondary emotion is anger is here and then there's something under it. So, but we kind of have to move through the anger to get to that secondary feeling. So allowing that to be released. My favorite is screaming into a pillow. Nothing better than a good scream. And then you're like, okay,
Amen.
I'm good. I am good. And then it's like, oh, I'm actually feeling really hurt by that person, or I'm really scared. And that's why the anger is coming up to protect me. So those would be where I would start with anger, especially in your case. And I think, especially being a man, I can talk about my experience being someone who is a female, that I'm not comfortable with anger. That's been my work. But I think men, especially if they've had male figures where anger was destructive or hurtful, there's a lot of shame around anger as well, that it's not safe. They're going to be an angry, violent man if they sit with their anger. But I think there's a lot of healing to do, regardless of your gender, around what anger can represent in our society.
Okay, you just blew my mind. No, seriously, I love it when my mind gets blown. It makes me realize that even though you go to work on yourself almost daily, you're always under construction, and you have a conversation with somebody like you who specializes in this, is that you're providing me with some tools, some fuels, and I'm going to tell you why.
Please do.
So, especially about the anger part, and having you kind of you've definitely shed some light on something, and I appreciate it. And is looking at being around anger 24/7 for many years of my formative life. That is an epiphany, because, like you kind of framed there, is I equate it to it being something that is bad or shameful. To have that emotion, or to be angry, or to exhibit it, or to show it, to let it out, versus like swallowing it. And that's what I did most of my life, because I didn't want to be that example, because I loathed that example, right? It was a painful example to be around and to experience, right? And to be at the brunt of it on a daily basis. So you've really helped me unpack that one in my head. So that'll be some homework for me, a little bit of journaling there. The other thing that you were mentioning about, kind of, it's a good dovetail, is anger could be a good motivator. It doesn't have to be just seen as negative. And you've touched on my working out and my training, and that's literally what it was cathartic. It was that release of bleeding the lines and purging myself of that anger in that way. And so I got into weights at 16, and then really enjoyed the release and the rush that it gave me. And then, of course, with that, put on some size as a guy, you want to feel good, body image. And so that was just a result that came along with being able to manage that anger and that stress and that rage, because you get rage that I would often feel inside, kind of swirling. So I wanted to get into habits, because you kind of touched on that, right? So there's working out, and then the other thing I wanted to touch on, and I mentioned this to you when we spent that week together, is a very smart person helped me out as well by, it ties into the motivator, is that I'm chasing a ghost. I was chasing a ghost, and what ghost am I chasing? Thought more about that, and you asked me that question, and one for me is love. Like, that's the one that's really at the top of the list. I've always wanted to give that to back, and have reciprocal relationships that way. But being a successful person, but more less about what I'm doing for others. I measured a lot of my self-worth and value about what I do for others, how I leave people, hopefully leaving them in a better place. But I lost myself for years and years and years in that, because I didn't take care of me. Self-worth was all about how everybody else was getting stuff. And so back to motivators, right? So my childhood kind of pushed me to be like, I got to prove myself. I got to prove myself. I got to show that I am, this good in all these areas. But at the same time, it's like, I guess what I'm getting at is you have to be, again, back safe and comfortable in your skin without worrying about what the world has to say about, you. So what other habits, Mackenzie, that you can impart on people? I mean, working out and fitness is good. I mean, maybe there's nutritional stuff in there. I don't know where you want to go with that.
I would love to answer that question, but I also want to circle back to just a couple of things you said, because I wanted to highlight the fact that this is what amazes me about human beings is we are so intelligent and we don't even realize it. Like, you found lifting at 16 as an outlet. You didn't necessarily maybe consciously choose that. It sounds like it was for mental health, with the added benefit of how you feel. And we know that the mind and body are not separate. They are very linked. But I just want to highlight that as a strength of yours, and to thank your 16-year-old self for finding that outlet. It could have gone a very different way. There's many other ways that you can expel rage, anger, anything like that. So just taking the time later when you journal to thank that 16-year-old Steph, to be like, you were looking out for you and you found something that changed your life for the better, and who knows what other path that could have led down.
I get goosebumps right now because you remind me of one of my favorite therapists that I had. Monica was her name. I spoke to you about that, and she was recommended to me by a very good close friend. He was seeing her, and he warned me. He said, "You wait, because you kind of did it there with the 16-year-old self." And when I was 17, as you know, it was a pivotal time in my life. And when I was talking about that in my early mid 30s with Monica, and here it came, I think it was like session 3 or 4, she pulled out this vacant chair and she put it in front of me. And she said, "What would you say to your 17-year-old self right now, knowing where you are in your life and all the therapy that you're doing?" And I remember just being waterworks. I just started bawling and crying because I could feel and see my 17-year-old self in everything that me was experiencing at that time of my life, when it was the darkest time of my life. And where I attempted suicide and, ended up in the hospital. And I share that openly. For me, it's a very easy conversation to have, because I hope it gives other people permission to feel and to think. And that's what Monica did for me. And you brought that to the surface, that experience of you saying, thank my 16-year-old self. And I never thought about that. I never thought that I consciously was looking to get into fitness and working out as my savior, my outlet, because like you said, it can manifest itself, and I see it every day. It can manifest itself in some very destructive behavior, and it's hard and it's sad to see, right? And learning to manage it. So that's super cool. Thanks for that.
Yeah, of course. And then the other thing before I get into the habits is that you had mentioned, needing, or what I heard was being needed by others is like your way of ensuring of getting love, and understanding that, again, that's also something, and I want everyone who is watching this to realize that any habit that you look back on that you're like, why was I doing that? You learned at some point that that was the way to get love. You learned at some point that if I am needed, I am safe. If I am needed, I am loved. And those are our basic needs, especially in childhood, especially in our formative years. We need care, connection, safety, to know that we are loved for who we are. And because you weren't necessarily shown that you were loved exactly who you are, not being of service to anyone, you had to find other ways to get that. So again, thinking that, like all of these habits, they're just trying to get you what you need. They might not be the thing that serves you in the long run, but they did serve you at one point. So that was just another thing that I wanted to highlight.
No, that's I know, I appreciate it. And that's the thing I had to teach myself over the years is that, I'd often ask myself the question, Mackenzie, is like, I'm sure you have a lot to say about the law of reciprocity. And you being a giver, and I know you because you're my daughter, and I know your soul and your spirit, and I would often be disappointed. I would just feel disappointed all day long, all the time. It was another feeling I would carry. I'd be like, I expected people's standards to be where mine were. and then if people didn't meet those standards or come close to them, I would just write them off. I'd be done with them.
Mm.
And then I came up in therapy too. And I'm like, well, that's not good, Steph. You're not going to have meaningful relationships if it's got to be packaged this way every single time and it's got to fit. And coming to the realization that we're all different. You can choose what relationships to. You don't have to be, maybe we'll talk about that, but some people may feel a bit stuck in a relationship. And if it's not reciprocating, it's not good, it's not healthy, then, or friendships, etc., or even at work, is that just because their standards are not exactly the same as mine in certain areas, that's okay. And that I learned to do things for others and continue to do so without the expectation that it needs to come back to me. So that's how I make my choices now. It's kind of like, hey, yeah, a person's asking for my time or they need my help. Do I want to do that? Because time is a currency you don't get back. I think it's obviously the most important currency out there. If somebody gives you your time, you should be loving them and thanking them for their time. Right? Is I now decide, nope, because I have given that individual time and attention, and it's take. And then I have to evaluate, am I okay with that? Because I'm not doing it for me to get something out of it, but just because I'm happy to do it. And that's where I would start asking myself those questions versus, well, are you doing this for recognition? Are you doing this because you're going to expect something back from that person? And if you don't get it back, are you going to be disappointed and upset about it? So I had to work through that for years to get to a point now where it's kind of like, yeah, I'm just me. If I do it because I want to, and I leave it there without any expectation of it swinging back my way.
Yeah, which is such a transformative thing to work through, and to, again, the awareness of knowing what you might be doing. And for me, I definitely had the same, where I was giving, and it was with the expectation or the desire to receive. Like I was like, if I do this for you, I'm hoping that you'll do this for me. And I'm trying to make myself worthy and needed so that I will get the love I need. And once I shifted to exactly what you said, the wanting and taking out the obligation of it, like I couldn't say no to save my life. I could have the busiest day and someone would be like, can you do this for me? And I'd be like, absolutely. I'm burnt out. I'm like resentful. I'm angry, but then they don't know why I'm angry because I said yeah. And then I wouldn't communicate that, oh, I actually am feeling resentful. So it's this huge overhaul of how you operate in the world. And in my experience, it's been a self-worth journey of, this person's not going to leave because I say no. Or if this person doesn't want to be my friend because I'm not, like, kind of debunking whatever those limiting beliefs are that were coming up for me when I wanted to say no. Even now, I will type out yes and then have to be like, do I have time for that? Do I want to do that? Does that bring me joy? What is my motivation for doing this? Is it because I feel obligated? No one wins, especially if you're giving from because I feel like I have to. I don't know about you, but I don't like receiving when someone's like, oh, well, I have to. Like, well, I don't want it. I want you to joyfully give it. And I want you to trust that I can hear a no as well. And that also, I needed to be a safe, I love the saying, as within, so without. All my relationships changed when I started accepting myself and started being a safe person for people to say no to. I can't expect people to think I wasn't feeling safe to say no because I also wasn't a person who was safe to say no to.
I'm going to hitch my wagon to that stuff too. This is so good. Oh my goodness. Talking about no, I wrote down the word that you said, worthy. That's a big word for me too. Learning and getting to a point with yourself to say that I'm worth it, that I am worthy of these very essential, important things that will make me whole, right? That's kind of how I look at it, make me as whole as possible. And I like the example that you used of, texting and saying yes, and then you because we'll get into enabling, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit, is saying yes real quick as a knee-jerk reaction, but you've learned to what I call pump the brakes, right? So I do the same. I pump the brakes and I go, whoa, hold on. And then I use the analogy too of going to my balcony. So I go to my balcony in my mind so I can see maybe more of a bird's eye view of the whole picture in the landscape, and to go, instead of it being just like in a vacuum, my decisions, then I realize, oh, I just put myself in a situation where now it's cascading. It's like a domino effect of my day. Like you said, like now I'm stressed. Now I've got increased anxiety because I said this yes. And of course, like we have the same DNA. We follow through, even if it means we'll die. Even if it means I'll die, I will be there for that yes that I committed to, right? So that's a kind of another thing. So enabling. You say yes, you say yes, you say yes, whether it's a friendship, an intimate relationship, whatever, at work, colleagues, then people get used to hearing that yes. And in a book I was consuming, it says you get to know somebody real quick the first time they hear you say no. Right? And it's true. It's a fact. And I've seen it. And especially if I've enabled by always being a giver and a pleaser, yes, 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 and then finally going, wow, I got to change my MO here. And then you say no for the first time. And then my therapist, Monica, warned me about that. She says, when you start changing things for yourself, the people are used to a certain script or a certain narrative, and now you're going to be rewriting over old tapes. And those people are going to go, what the fuck is wrong with you? What? No. What do you mean no? You high? What's your problem? And then now it's just rejection. It feels like rejection to the person. Now you're dealing with having to manage those things. It's just fascinating, right? That
it is
when you're trying to get to higher ground, and sometimes people don't want to see you get there. They don't want to see you get there. They want to keep you down. But anyway, I'm a little bit of a tangent there. So you're worthy. Talked about. Is there anything you wanted to add about comments about enabling? Or I got a few more things here that you talked about that we can talk about.
Yeah, I did actually want to touch on like how you said that you will be there if you say yes. I actually was the opposite. I would overpromise and then I would cancel last minute because I'd be like either in pain, like I actually learned my cycle and my painful periods got a lot better when I started to say no, because I was overextending myself and I wasn't listening to my body, but I wouldn't. And then I didn't like that about myself. I want to be seen as a stable, consistent person. I want my word to mean something. When I say, yes, I can show up for that, I want to actually be able to show up for that. So I was creating this, I had a lack of self-esteem but it was a perpetual cycle that I was causing, because I would say yes, 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 and overpromise. And then it would get to the close and I hadn't slept. I wasn't like feeling that rested. I was in pain. So I would have to cancel, or I'd feel so overwhelmed and I would neglect, like I was very much a people pleaser and I would neglect myself. But then I would get to a point where let's say I had an assignment due the next day, but I said I would go to dinner and then it's not done. So then I'm like, well, I'm choosing between showing up for someone I care about and showing up for myself. But now I'm in this self-fulfilling prophecy where I need to choose to show up for myself, but I'm letting this person down. So I really had to learn that people can handle being disappointed. I can, like, people say no and you're like, okay, well, fine. It's not that hard, or it's not that hard. It's not that serious, I guess, all the time. And that if I wanted to be someone that I liked, I had to feel like my word was worth something. And that meant I had to put myself first, because the only way I can say yes wholeheartedly is if I make the time. Like yesterday, someone asked me to do something and I really wanted to go for a run. And I knew I needed to move. I knew I would be anxious and I wouldn't sleep. I've learned how connected I call myself a delicate little ecosystem. I have certain things that I need in order to be a sane, stable person. And I cannot compromise on those things. Nobody wins. And I was like, okay, old Mackenzie would say yes and immediately push my run to the side. I don't need to go for a run. I'll go tomorrow. And then I was like, nope, I want to be a person I like. And that starts with showing up for myself. And I said, no, and I went for my run and it was great. And that's where self-esteem comes from too, is the following through of showing up for yourself. So I went for that run and I got home and I had great dinner and I was like, I took care of myself today. And now I have the space to say yes and mean it and to show up. And for a long time, I was not someone who I would say showed up for other people in the way that I would have liked.
The messages that I garner from what you're saying are like so clear and resounding. It's like a big church bell going off, and it's so awesome to hear you speak in this way. And this is a medium for me that I'm getting to know my daughter a lot more too. So this is special for me. And you use the example of saying yes, going to dinner, with somebody you're committing to, and then you've got this assignment, the project that directly impacts you, and that whole part about showing up for yourself, and how we will forfeit and sabotage ourselves by not showing up for ourselves. So let's say you don't do that assignment and you get a 0, or you cram it and you do a piss poor job of it because you rush through it, and then you get a mark and you go, yeah, I got an F. There's no fucking surprise, because I knew that I wasn't prepared. I didn't do a bang up job, or didn't take the time to do the job. And that is such a powerful message, Mackenzie, is that we don't understand sometimes how we hurt ourselves by not showing up for ourselves with using a simple example like that. And I'm sure anybody who's listening to this, and I know for myself, it's going to be great reflection on how, when we say yes and when we say no, that it's like picking up a stick, right? I have one of my favorite quotes, right? You have no choice but to pick up both ends of that stick, right? Then you say, oh, I'm going to say yes, but what else is coming with that yes? Or I'm going to say no, what else is coming with that no? And it's being able to look down at the other end of that stick to be able to see, am I making the most appropriate decision for myself? So that's powerful. I love that. And the other thing I wanted to touch on, I'm sure you'll have something to say, is I got to a point, and my therapist helped me out with that, and I had a friend who helped me out with that. And I am going to use the F-bomb on this one, is not having to fucking justify myself. Not justifying myself. And say no. And then somebody saying, well, why not? It's just no. I can't. Or you can or you won't. It doesn't matter. Say no. And I had to learn it was so uncomfortable to try and, to wear those shoes the first time. Somebody say, oh, why not? Especially when there's tone, right? It's not like, oh, well, why not? And then okay, well, maybe I'll walk through that door and share something personal. Maybe it's just something, if it's a personal matter that I don't feel like discussing with you. Well, why not? It's like, it's just no. And you need to respect that. And if you can't, no. So I don't know. How do you feel about that? The whole justifying.
I love that, because with my background in psychology, and especially with trauma, it's very common to over-explain yourself, to feel the need to be like, oh, I can't do this because of this and this and this, because you're waiting for someone to, one, you don't necessarily feel confident in your no. You don't feel worthy of saying no. Like, you are allowed to say no without there being repercussions of that relationship or whatever. Or for me, beliefs would come up. Oh, they hate you. Whatever thoughts come up with that no. And the other thing is learning that someone's reaction to your boundary is not actually your responsibility. That is to varying degrees, depending on the relationship that it is. For example, I value our relationship. If you ask me, oh, how come? I care about you enough to explain why. I also trust you that you can hear my no. But that's another thing with no, is how much you want to explain can directly correlate to the value of your relationship. Especially if it's new. Let's say it's a romantic partnership and you are changing the script, and that challenges someone else's perception and might challenge their security. Like, you are two people in this dynamic, and you care about them enough to feel safe with what your new behavior is. That doesn't mean that you're enabling or coddling or changing what you need to suit them, but having the conversation and having the strength to be like, I really can't do that tonight. This is why. I really appreciate your understanding in this. Like, coming from a really gracious place. But if they throw a tantrum because of your no, are you going to hold true to your no? Is that someone that you want in your life? Like, a lot of self-responsibility comes with saying no, because now you've got some decisions to make. If that person's reaction to your no makes you feel unsafe, especially if it's a new skill that you're trying on, it's like, I think of it as like a seedling. Like it needs protection. It needs relationships in which I can be like, Dad, no, I can't do that. And you're like, no problem, kiddo. And then it's like, oh, so now you're proving to me that my internal belief that saying no has negative repercussions isn't actually true. So the more that I'm showing my brain and my nervous system that something different is possible, the safer I will feel to continue to say that no. So that if I have enough interactions like that with you or with friends or whatever, then when I do meet someone, let's say it's a no in with a colleague and they do throw a tantrum, I can be like, how interesting that that's your reaction, instead of being like, oh shit, I made this person upset or whatever. And now it's my responsibility to be like, actually, just kidding. Yeah, I can do that because you aren't okay with my no. So those are the things that have been my experience with saying no. And I'm far from perfect, but it's been a really cool journey. It's very liberating to be able to say no.
You're taking my breath away, Mackenzie. You really are. Just almost just hang. You're taking me to school, which is absolutely incredible, fantastic. You definitely have a deep and intimate knowledge of all the things you speak about. I mean, you went to town on no, like in a way that is so empowering for me, so empowering and validating too. You know, to hear it from your mind and the way you understand it from a counseling perspective, and that's kind of what this session is. It's like you're exhibiting your counseling, prowess, your smarts and your experience and your background, and it really shines through. And I highlighted a comment you said that, how confident you are in your no. Like that one, it hit me right in the side of the head. Like, because it's true. It's like people can smell weakness and they exploit it. Like you said, I've said no, where it's like, no. And people are like, ooh, you don't sound too sure about that. But maybe if I give enough pressure, enough guilt, right? Because we're all good at doing that to each other too, is guilting, right? And a lot of times family, we can talk about that another time. But family especially can be very quick at guilt. What do you mean no? And I like what you said about, that seedling, that analogy, that me being able to envision that. And then you saying no to me, and I'm like, hey, yeah, because I truly embody that. If somebody says no to me, I don't push to go, well, why not? Well, why can't you? Or, to create that feeling, or it becomes almost confrontational, versus I respect that the person has a reason for saying no. That's where I leave it. No problem. And if they're like, well, I said, no, Mackenzie, it's okay. I'm fine. You can't, and that's okay. Right. And how, I guess the way you were explaining it, the way I understand it, so like training your subconscious, especially in our relationship, right? And that example was just absolutely super cool for me, like just incredible. Now you mentioned cyclical living. I'm not sure if we kind of went there yet. I mean, everything you're saying is so flippin' smart.
Thank you.
No, I'm being absolutely genuine about that, Mackenzie. So yeah, I don't know. Did you want to, dive into that topic?
I would love to. Yeah, the reason I'm so passionate. So cyclical living has to do with the cycles in nature, so the seasons. But for me, what I'm most passionate about is the menstrual cycle. And I had touched on my history with mental health and how it actually ended up being linked to my cycle. It took me 10 years, many doctors, many therapists. No one ever was like, did you ever think your cycle and your mental health might be linked? So that was really my introduction into the world of cyclical living and learning more about the menstrual cycle. And from there, coupled with my experience in counseling, which I guess is where to tie it all in, is once I found cyclical living, and it's called cycle syncing. So there are 4 phases of your menstrual cycle, and there's a way of living that kind of syncs your life to those 4 phases if you are someone who menstruates, that enables you to feel your best, that helped me to. I have a history of an eating disorder. I've been through the ringer with my body and mind, and finding this critical piece in health and wellness changed my life. It healed my relationship to my body, to my cycle. I stopped feeling like my body and my mind were against me. And my background in counseling and psychology and everything I learned about trauma and how, like I said earlier, your body and your mind are always trying to protect you. They're always in your favor, and learning that and incorporating things like parts work, which is how I said, like, thank your 16-year-old self. That would be a part of you, would be your 16-year-old self. Or it might be your anger, it could be a part of you. Acknowledging that we have many parts and that they all require love and care at different times really changed my life. And the reason I'm so passionate about it is anytime I talk to people who menstruate about their cycle, there's always this light bulb moment, and it gives me so much satisfaction and also pisses me off so much, because this is stuff that I think we should be taught about in school, like body literacy. There's so much that we aren't taught that keeps us in the dark, that is so simple. And if we just had this foundation of knowing our bodies and knowing that we are cyclical beings, I think would really change a lot for people who menstruate. And there's a huge gender bias in medical research. Like things like intermittent fasting are only studied on men, because people who menstruate have a cycle, and if they get pregnant, or it's too complicated to include women or people who menstruate in some of this research. So there's a whole slew of health information out there based on a male body that we are applying to people who are not necessarily male. So that's where my interest and my passion comes in, is tying all these parts that I've learned over the years about the body, nervous system regulation, holistic health, you name it, all of it, and bringing it together and telling people who menstruate there's nothing wrong with them, and also that our cycles are not just meant for pregnancy. I think that's a big thing in society, is that you get it so that you're always preparing for pregnancy, but there's so much magic and power in the menstrual cycle that has nothing to do with being like procreating. Yeah, I could go on about it forever. So please take it away.
Yeah, no, fascinating. Again, I know nothing about it, not because I'm a man, but it's just all very new
Mm-hmm.
and information, and some of the stuff that you're studying and that you're current on. I'm sure any, I think it's important for, well, you know me, I have a very feminine side. So I always believe a man should be just as equally interested in the other side of, the
Mm-hmm.
species, if you will, like understanding of women and their physiology and the things that they go through and et cetera, and feelings and emotions. Absolutely, I think it's important.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure if anybody was listening to that's interested, they can reach out to you and ask for more, because I think so, Mackenzie. The things that you share is they're critical and they're important. And going back to the beginning of what the show's all about, tools and fuels, right? And you're dropping a lot of breadcrumbs. And I hope that if there's anybody out there that's seeing some of these breadcrumbs, they'll pick them up. And reach out to people who understand it and understand it as well as you do. And it's wonderful, and it's refreshing, and it's breathtaking to listen to you speak, because as you know, I'm an ardent fan of learning. I love to learn, and that means I'm growing, and that means I'm
Mm-hmm.
evolving. And then through this experience with you on this show, I'm growing and I'm evolving, because I'm not only getting to know more about you, I'm also getting a deeper understanding on topics that I thought I knew, and some stuff that I didn't know anything about, like the
Mm-hmm.
cyclical living stuff. So that's really fascinating. That could be another show, just talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Sky's the limit. Um, so the other thing that you mentioned that I'm very curious about is attachment style.
Mm-hmm.
That one I just couldn't wait to get to. Attachment style. What say you, Mackenzie St Laurent?
I love attachment styles. I think everybody should know what their attachment style is. I think they should learn what their friend's attachment style is, their partner, their parent. Like, it is such a good tool in understanding yourself and others in relationship. And we are in relationship with everyone all the time. And once you understand attachment styles, and I'll go into what they are in a second, but you can kind of start to see them in other people, and it really helps you to understand how people want you to show up for them and how you want other people to show up for you. So there are 4 attachment styles. There's secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized, which can also be anxious avoidant. So secure, and typically your attachment style is set in childhood. So it's from research from childhood development of how children reacted to when their mom left the room. So there's varying reactions, and that's based on upbringing and learning whether your primary caregiver is a secure attachment figure, which means they can meet your emotional, physical needs. And you learn that and you keep that, but you can change your attachment style. So if you're secure, you feel secure in yourself. It's a nervous system thing too. You feel secure in your nervous system is pretty regulated. Anxious and avoidant and disorganized attachment are coupled with dysregulated nervous system. So anxious attachment is if someone doesn't text me back, and our attachment styles can be triggered in all relationships, but they are the most prevalent in romantic relationships because they bring up the most of our childhood stuff. So there's a reason your partner triggers you the most.
Agreed.
And anxious and avoidance tend to find each other because they trigger each other, which we have learned. I don't have a secure attachment style. I'm working towards secure, but we've learned that feeling of being dysregulated is love, and we feel safe in that area. Whereas if we met a secure person and we haven't done the work on ourselves, it might feel boring because they're reliable. They text when they say they're going to text. Like, reliability is a big one. Whereas anxious is, let's say I'm seeing someone new and they don't text me for a day, but they typically text me every day. I start to be like, oh my God, they don't like me. What's happening? They're with someone else. You start to ruminate and get really hypervigilant. Whereas avoidant is like this fear, both are fear of intimacy, all of them are, but avoidant is when, let's say you're texting someone a lot and then that avoidant person gets overwhelmed by how much your energy you're like giving to them or how much love, and they're like, oh my God, no. And then they push away. They might be the ghosters in the dating world of like, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how to deal with it. I'm just going to ghost. And then anxious avoidant is kind of like a push and pull. It's like, I'm going to text you a lot. Maybe I'm in the anxious state and then you're reciprocating. And then I'm like, oh shit. And then I back up. So it's this like dance. So you can be one of them and you can always work towards secure attachment. But that's a little bit about attachment styles.
Oh, that's fascinating. And yeah, like I agree with, the examples you've given and kind of how they work, at a high level because there's just so much psychology behind that, right? And it drives a person's behavior. Mm-hmm. And a question for you is, because you touched on it, especially when you talk about texting. So we've been around for thousands of years. We're social creatures. We've evolved in the way that we're social with each other, but I'd say especially in the last, I'm going to say 10, 15 years, that the phone, the personal devices have all but really taken over in how we communicate, we interact with each other. We talked about that when we were together. Mm-hmm. And so there's already anxiety, specifically talking about attachment styles. So predating all this technology, we were forced to be in the same space to deal things out. Like, you used the word ghosting. I did a podcast on that a while back, and that's just one of my favorite topics is ghosting, man. It's fascinating. Mm-hmm. But you helped me with the attachment style thing. I'm like, oh, okay. So I had some stuff kind of wrong there instead of just being staunch, like, you're an idiot for ghosting, versus kind of going, okay, well, I understand your attachment style now. Mm-hmm. Perhaps I need to consider that a little bit in formulating my feelings or my reaction towards, an individual. So thank you for that as well. Is we were forced to actually do this, right? Let's go meet for coffee and talk about it. At work, you deal with it, or family. Like, you were in each other's space, and you would be able to get to the root of things a little bit quicker and easier because there's so much information that comes with being physically in the same space with somebody, right? Because we're social creatures. Mm-hmm. So the question that I'm rounding the corner on is, with the advent of texting and everybody hiding behind texting or emailing, that must drive some of that anxiety or feed some of these attachment styles a little bit more hypersensitized. Would that be kind of a fair statement?
I would say so. I definitely think with texting and like there's so many studies done about phones, like that even just having it close to you, you are more anxious. So I would imagine that it would heighten those already anxious tendencies and also just give us another form of attaching to our anxiety. Like I am curious how those attachment styles might show up. Let's say when we wrote letters rather than texting, and but it's
Yeah.
this more immediate, like even me saying like, oh, they usually text me every day. Like that's a lot of communication, daily
Hmm.
communication.
Hmm.
So I would imagine that just having access and 24-hour access, whether it's Instagram to like check up on people and you always know what people are doing. There's so many more stories we can make up in our head of, oh, they're on Instagram, but they haven't texted me. So I'm
Oh,
feeling,
hey, they're at a party. I wasn't invited to that.
yeah, yeah,
But I'm making a joke, but it's true, right? Because
yeah.
you're always, and I want to spend a little bit more time on it because I think coming from your background and your expertise to kind of help me out, because this shows it's just as much for me than the rest of the world is out there that's viewing it, right? So is about that anxiety, because for me when it's texting, somebody will text something and I'll be like, what the fuck are you saying? What are you saying?
Hmm.
Like, it sounds like there's tone. It sounds like, it's like not at all what I was saying on my end. That's why I'm still, even old school. I'm like, oh man, pick up the phone. I want to talk about it because
Hmm.
we're so missing each other right now. And it's becoming something way beyond what it should be and what it is. And now you're managing that. So that's why for me, my anxiety, we want to talk about like anxiety and stress, is
Hmm.
trying to get to, the brass taxes of something, about somebody's what they're thinking or feeling, whatever, through text. I mean, it doesn't. I don't particularly enjoy it. It actually
Hmm.
makes me more stressed
Hmm.
because I don't feel that I'm being properly represented in what I'm saying. Or, okay, I'm talking to a certain attachment style or certain, and now I got to go. I got to package this way, a certain way for Mackenzie, so that perhaps she doesn't take it to, you know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
most people will just communicate in their way.
Yes.
And it'll be like, what do you mean you had an issue with what I said? That's just, it's not, I meant nothing by it. I meant nothing
Hmm.
by it. My intentions weren't that. So anyway, I don't know. Maybe you can share a little bit more about that, because I think it just creates that much more anxiety and stress for people, and even hiding behind texting versus. So what are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts, and I love this because I've been thinking about it a lot as well. Even like authenticity, the amount of time that you have to think about your response and to edit it, and to, you see the bubbles and then they go away. And it's like you have so much time that you don't necessarily have in person. And I always try to think like, what would I just say? Like, what would come naturally? But also, I think it's really challenging. There's a lot of people that you might not have met before, like that you're texting to figure something out that you've never talked to on the phone, and not having that context of how that person is in person can really skew your image of someone via text. Like they could be a really dry texter, really straight to the point, and then in person speak in these like soliloquies. And it's like, how do you really get to know someone?
Right.
Only through written word. And the other thing that has been really helpful for me, because I would have a lot of anxiety about how people text, even friends. I'd be like, are they mad at me because they didn't use an emoji? And I saw this thing and it was talking about not responding to subtext.
Mm.
And that changed my life of like, there's no reading into it. They are words on a screen. I'm going to receive them. If I need clarity, I'll ask for it, but not responding to what I think is hidden in this message. So not responding to subtext, and even those physical
I like that.
reactions. Yeah,
I
it's
like
like
that.
even there's been people who are like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't message you. Like you must have thought." And I'm like, "I didn't think anything. I thought if they message me, great. If not, no problem." Like just giving yourself and your mind that space and taking that off your plate, and even your nervous system, of being like, do I really want to let, because someone said K, ruin my day? Like, do I really want to spend this much time thinking about the letter K, you know?
Okay, I'm laughing my ass off because that's a real thing that happened to me some years ago, and I just said K instead of, I got schooled instead of using two Ks.
Oh,
K
yes.
K, just K. It came off as abrupt
Yeah,
and
like
rude.
K.
Almost like it's like, is everything okay? I'm like, yeah. And anyway, that was a thing for me. So I had to learn. I'm like, oh wow, and I especially like the whole subtext thing. Like I like my brain absolutely just appreciates that, and that takes some training, right? Because we're conditioned. Right? I think it's an underlying theme here. Of what we're talking about is we're conditioned, whether it's from childhood or intimate relationships we've been in, and sometimes we have our own cycles and we repeat our own cycles, and it's breaking the cycle so that we're in a better, more secure, happier nervous system state. And there's a lot to be said about the nervous system, as you know. My background is in understanding that too as well, and let me tell you, I know when my nervous system is completely fried and frazzled, and I know it. I know all the signs and what that is. Coming back to that, but so back to the subtext thing, and just letting it lie, like that's powerful and but hard to do because again, like these devices, like when before we got on, I said I'm putting it on focus, silent, right? Now my phone, people may not know this, but my phone's on not on focus, meaning silencing my notifications, but my phone is silent 24/7. My phone does not make a sound. No notifications. It could be an email, it could be a text, it could be a Facebook, it could be whatever. I don't want to hear it because it makes me anxious. For having that thing go off for every different type of notification that can come in from so many different directions, I literally would go loopy.
Oh, yeah.
So I've been doing that for years. I check my phone often enough that I don't need the instant, oh, okay, I gotta check that. I gotta check that, right? So anything else you want to kind of share and add about that? Maybe managing that a little bit better?
Yeah, when you're speaking about keeping it on silent, the other thing that came to mind was like, we are not meant to be available 24/7. We are not meant to,
People will
like,
argue that. People will argue that.
I am telling you, it is not healthy. It is not good for, like, you are not available. I should not be able to check my emails on my run. Like, that is my run. I am unavailable. If I didn't have a cell phone, no one would be able to talk to me on my run.
Yeah.
And implementing that and those boundaries with your phone, I would say keep your phone out of your bedroom. Do not sleep with it next to you. Studies have shown that you are more like your brain is on. You are aware that someone might need you.
Yeah.
You do not, it's not healthy or normal to be needed all of the time.
Yeah.
You like boundaries with your phone will set you free, and managing expectations. I will send someone, I will be like, I saw your text, I will answer in a couple hours. Like, because then I'm not like, oh, they're wondering why I'm not answering, or maybe I'm doing something for my business on Instagram, which means my phone is in my hand, but I'm not answering. And managing expectations for yourself and with
There it is.
others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There it is. And it's teaching those other people, teaching them that this is your flow. And I especially like this part of the show because me, I was hardwired to my phone. I was always entrepreneurial or self-employed. When I was a strength and conditioning coach, it would always be like I had to be always on and act fast or answer, or, oh, a new client or this, oh yeah, get them in, whatever. So strike while the iron's hot. You got it all the time. And then all I did again is enabling and teaching, people on the other side that, oh, he'll answer right away. And I've had scenarios where I wasn't able to answer, didn't answer, and then it's like, are you okay? Is everything all right? Why didn't you answer me? And I'm like, holy Moses. That's where for me the light bulb went off and said, this is not healthy. This is not good. And I got to retrain myself to retrain others. And I like what you do is to say, hey, I kind of received your message. I'll get back to you in a couple hours. But and that's why I laughed about it when you said, it'd be available 24/7. Yeah, well, there's a large populace out there, including employers and some bosses, that believe that you should be available 24/7. And because you've got this thing, I know I can reach you. I sent it. It says delivered. And hey, where the fuck are you?
Yeah.
Where are you? And even your friends can do that to you. And it's like, hey, so I like this part of the conversation because I believe it really, with the the introduction to some of this technology we've had for in the last decade has hypersensitized us, right? Has created more stress and more anxiety, and even the ability, and this is maybe like for another day, but just to kind of softly touch on it, is for malicious people who have bad intentions, they can just have access to saying stuff about people, texting, and say, okay, I'm going to block them, but then they're saying stuff about you on social media, and it just goes on and on and on, and it's really sad. It's awful, and it's awful that the technology has made us so vulnerable and accessible, right? So, anything else on that there, Smarty Pants?
I was just thinking, just how people want you to have your phone. Like, this is by design. There's a reason it is.
You're Mamere. Sorry.
Hi, Mamere. I just want people to understand that it is by design how much we are tied to our phone. Like, Instagram is built based on like the slot machines. It works on our dopamine. It works on our all those things. So it's actually really empowering and hard. I don't want anyone watching this to be like, I'm sure there are thoughts of like, I can't do that because of work. I can't do that because of this. I can't do that because of that. But it is worth having the boundaries with your phone and technology, and making technology is meant to work for us. We're not meant to work for technology. And finding ways. I like that. It can be a tool. I love Instagram. I have to have boundaries with it. But as soon as I looked at it as a tool, I'm just going to create. I like it for the creativity part of it, but how can I do that in a way that serves me, that doesn't feel depleting? So I think that goes for anything in your life. And if there are any thoughts that come up of why you can't, I would encourage you to sit with what that belief is telling you. Is it that, oh, I can't tell my boss I'm not available because they'll fire me? Do you really want to work for a company that fires you because you're not on your phone 24/7? And bringing that back to you taking care of yourself kind of full circle and showing up for yourself is the most important thing. And again, it should work for you, not the other way around.
So this brilliant, absolutely brilliant, great advice, and I love how you just kind of anchor it in a way that is consumable, that you can actually do something with that information for yourself, immediately. Another tool in the toolbox. Absolutely love it. And this show really has grown a lot of tentacles, and they all kind of come back and feed into itself. And then talking about this device is going back to, if I'm measuring my self-worth about what me doing everything for everybody else. And I got my insecurities, which we all do, and I need to be needed and all that good stuff. Well, holy Hannah, you're going to be glued to this phone. You're going to need that phone. You're going to be addicted to that phone. Again, the dopamine, we get into that and what that does, and holy, this just hijacks your whole endocrine system. Is you're going to have a hard time giving that up. So the underlying message here is, like you said, you got to sit with it and you got to work that out for yourself. Of why do I need to feed this thing? And the other message that I like is it's the technology is supposed to work for us. I never even looked at it that way. I'm like, holy shit, not the other way around. So that's another great nugget for people to walk away with. So the other things that I'm curious about as we get deeper into the show is, some of the, maybe getting for myself and the viewing audiences, some of the counseling that you've been doing, that you've specialized in, where you're looking to take your counseling practice, business, I don't know how you want to call it or frame it, that's for you to kind of share what it is, where that's going, what's around the corner for you, and what can your dad and the world, who we all need this kind of conversation with somebody, whether it's with you or somebody else that we trust or who help enlighten. So I'm curious about that whole package.
Yeah, so I actually am on a break from school, from counseling right now. I haven't finished my program or anything like that, but I am planning on using all the tools that I learned in my bachelor's in psychology and in the counseling schooling I have done in doing more holistic health coaching with, I really want to use the tenets of counseling, like the therapeutic relationship will be present in any coaching that I do, holding space. I also love social work and the idea of sharing resources and being a connector to other resources. I really value accessibility and inclusivity, and I have so many resources to share with people, and I'm really looking forward to building my one-on-one clientele, especially focused on cyclical living and holistic health. I want to be the antidote to the person that's trying to sell you another supplement or telling you nothing's wrong, or to go on birth control because you have anything struggling with your menstrual cycle. Not that there's anything wrong with medication, but I think we have, what I found in counseling as well with nervous system regulation is how far we've deviated from the things that just naturally regulate us, like time in nature, seeing the sun in the morning, getting enough sleep, eating. Like, my anxiety got so much better when I started eating protein and fat at breakfast. Like, we're all interconnected. And I want to take a multi-pronged approach to emotional wellness. And I'm going to be hosting some workshops on the menstrual cycle and really just getting more into educating people about their bodies, their cycle, and how you can cycle your nutrition, your self-care, your workouts, all of that to your cycle. And if you aren't someone who has a cycle, just setting the foundation for a balanced life so that you don't feel terrible. It's like, I just want people, and I want to help people reconnect to what they already know in their body, that they can feel well, they can feel rested, they can feel good about their life, and they don't have to grind and hustle, and they don't have to come last in their life. I feel like the current societal landscape is that you go, 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 hustle, 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 sleep when you're dead. Like, there's this real, like, we only have one life and one body, and our life is not meant to be working ourselves into the ground. And there are really accessible ways to feel well. And if we all reconnected with that, I also think it would help the environment. Like, everything benefits when we reconnect with nature.
Man, that's really well said, Mackenzie, and I genuinely feel that we need much more of that, and it's nice that you're that example out there, and in the way you talk about it, you embody it. I can see that you feel it, and when you share it, and that's beautiful, and that's awesome. And the nutritional part of things, as there's been times in my life I treat my body like a dumpster, and there's other times, and then you realize, okay, yeah, and then everything else, your nervous system, your anxiety, and your stress is all manifesting itself into this, feeling gross, and kind of like you're saying, feeling well and feeling good. And we have a large part and duty in that. And it's through people like you, we're getting the coaching or the counseling or the insight and direction of how to implement and and people think too, Mackenzie, that things the other thing that's a struggle with people is that overnight success, that things, it didn't take within 2 days. It's like, well, holy Moses, but we're programmed that way. We're programmed, like, say, oh, here's a pill for this, or here's a new diet trend that you can take this, off Shark Tank, and you lose belly fat. And it's just like, we've, to your point, we've been manufactured to get away from really truly being holistic and healthy. And case in point, I was recommended a book recently. It's called Genius Foods, and it's absolutely fantastic, like unbelievable. And I'm a very coachable person too, and I've implemented this in the last couple of weeks. Is some of the recommendations from this expert and this author, and it largely to do with brain function and brain capacity, dementia, Alzheimer's, and all that stuff. But really, inflammation in our body, right? And the things that cause inflammation, as that ties into what in your background. I mean, it's an insidious thing, and it causes a lot of issues, even in the way you think and you feel and you react to things, your environment around you, right? So that I completely appreciate and understand. Is the other thing. So, do you have a business name? What is that? I don't know it, and I think the audience should know it. What do you call yourself?
My business is named Unearthing Wellness, and that comes from the idea that it is already there to be found. And I just also wanted to touch on my coaching style and the reason that I drawn to coaching through counseling is so much of the information that is shared health-wise comes from like they use shame as a motivator. And I really want to go away from that and take how I've said this entire episode of everything is serving you. So whether you're struggling to implement a sleep routine, if you're struggling with any of these things, the antidote is not shame and taking the time to understand why you might be struggling, what you need. Your needs might be different from another. Like every time you open Instagram, there's something telling you to do something, or there's another book, and finding what works for you and being okay with that. And maybe your ideal morning routine is reading your Substack, which is like a newsletter platform, with a coffee because you like that time to create, like really creating a wellness routine and a life routine that is based in loving yourself and accepting yourself and knowing what your needs and your values are, and knowing that you can be well no matter what kind of person you are. You don't have to be the green juice, get up at 6 a.m., do like a HIIT workout kind of wellness person. Wellness is whatever that means to you. And I want to help people to feel well the second that they sit down with me, because there is going to be no shame. There's going to be a lot of understanding and empathy for wherever you're at. I've struggled with sleep my entire life, and I live and breathe this stuff. And I still have mental blocks as to why I push through when I'm tired. I know how bad my phone is next to my bed, but it's so damn hard to just put it in the other. Like, I am aware and I have empathy for that, and there will never be any judgment. And just, yeah, that is my coaching style, is to be a very empathetic person, to meet you where you're at, which is where my counseling background comes in, of like, you are the expert on your own life and your own body. And when's the last time a healthcare practitioner told you that? And I might be jaded from my time in healthcare and being in certain systems and being not asked any questions about my body, or not asked any questions about what works for me or doesn't, or what my philosophy might be about medication or not, and just taking the time to actually get to know the entire person behind the body, I guess.
Well, I can say this easily, and it's not because you're my daughter, because I'm very objective. If I didn't know you and I just met you and we didn't have the relationship we have, I would and do feel 100% completely at ease. It's an immediate feeling of comfort listening to you, talking to you. A feeling of trust, and just because there are words, there's tone, and then there's what I call the nuances. It's just the stuff that's baked into what it is that you're sharing and how you're sharing it. You're an absolutely beautiful soul. You're just such a tremendous individual, and 27 years old already, and you've dedicated a large part of yourself to yourself, and I love you for that. And to explain that, it's because I've had to do it for myself over the years. So a lot of what you share and you say is, I get, and I have the same DNA as you, and I want the same things as you do for people, but I don't have your expertise or your background, and my approach is a little bit different, I guess, day to day, which is, trying to pay it forward, or helping somebody, or coaching somebody out of a difficult scenario, or they're having some friction with somebody else, and how do I hold that conversation? And I love that you're picking a profession in coaching.
Mm-hmm.
You will excel, and I love your business name is absolutely stellar. That's stellar. A lot of thought went into that, and that I connect you right away. The unearthing, it's like it's already all there, and it's the truth. It's already all there, right? And it's getting people to not only believe and trust in themselves, but also you took me through in this show through a process. That's what you did. That's what coaching and counseling is. You took me through a process, and I'm going to be, my head's going to be spinning for a few days, because you've said some things in a very intelligent way. in giving me more keys, to walk around with, for myself. So that's a gift, and that's typically how I wrap up shows, is to say thank you for the gift of you and the gift of your time and being on the cusp, and sharing all the wonderful things you did and what's coming for you. And you'll be great. You'll do great. That I have no qualms about. And I usually ask, is there a final message? I know you kind of had a final message and all that, but is there kind of like a final message that you want to cap off your show with?
Yeah, the thing that I come back to that I wish everyone knew already, but I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong with you. Like exactly how you are, where you are in life, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you.
Awesome. And then the last thing is, where can they find you? Like, is it, somebody sees this and is liking, some of the content and would like to know more or explore more with you? What's the easiest way of getting hold of Mackenzie St Laurent?
You can email me at mackenziestlaurent@gmail.com. It's all one word. And you can also find me on Instagram at Unearthing Wellness.
Okay, let me see here. Mackenzie. I can post this. I'm doing a typing course, by the way, for the first time, because this hunt and peck business doesn't make me very productive. I was doing that in the office for a little bit at gmail.com. Let's see if this will post well. It looks right. My glasses on. There we go. Perfect. And then the other one was your website, you said? Unearthing?
It's Instagram, so it's UN.earthing.
UN.earthing.
_wellness.
Earthing_wellness? That's your handle, right?
Yeah.
So it's like an at symbol, right?
Yeah.
Am I getting that right?
Yes.
So at UN.earthing_well, not wellness. And I'll just write Instagram. There you go. And I'll show that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Excellent. Woohoo.
Woohoo.
Well, kiddo. Wow. That was awesome. Thank you so
much. Thank you.
No. Love you. Love you tons.
Love you too.
Thank you for doing this. And like I said to you before, if there's anything else you ever want to talk about, a specific topic you want to do a show on, you know where to find me. Be happy to host you again.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
All right. You take care.
You too.
Thanks everyone for watching. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.